Long before there were scientists to measure the stars or historians to record the ages, there were storytellers. They sat by fires under vast, unknowable skies and whispered tales of gods who shaped the mountains, of heroes who descended into darkness, and of beasts that prowled the edges of the world. These were not idle fantasies. They were humanity's first answers to the deepest questions: why we suffer, why we dream, and what happens when we close our eyes for the last time. Tonight, we wander through the oldest stories ever told, the myths that gave meaning to thunder and made sense of grief, the legends that named the constellations and breathed life into the dead. This is not history in the ordinary sense. It is something older. It is the memory of our species, half forgotten, half remembered, lingering still in the quiet corners of our minds. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. Over the next 2 hours, over 100 gentle facts will drift through the mists of myth and legend. There is nothing to memorize, nothing to remember. Just listen and let your mind wander where the oldest stories still echo. Have you ever wondered why the same tales appear across civilizations that never touched? Why flood myths and trickster gods and journeys to the underworld repeat themselves throughout history? You are not alone. If these stories bring you peace, consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who might also need a calm place to rest tonight. Now settle in wherever you are. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Take one slow breath in and let it go. The world outside can wait. Tonight, we walk through temples and forests that exist only in memory, through lands shaped by words spoken thousands of years ago. Let us begin. Every culture that has ever existed has created its own mythology. From the frozen tundras of Siberia to the sun-drenched islands of the Pacific, every human society has looked at the world and woven stories to explain what it saw. These are not remnants of superstition, but something universal, something that speaks to the nature of being human. Wherever people gathered, they asked the same questions: why does the sun rise? Where do we go when we die? And in the absence of science, they answered with gods, spirits, and legendary beings who walked between worlds. Some traditions told of sky fathers and earth mothers, others spoke of tricksters and creators, but all sought to place humanity within a larger cosmos. The myths changed with each landscape, each language, yet they served the same purpose everywhere. They offered order in a chaotic world. They gave comfort in the face of death. Mythology is humanity's oldest conversation with the unknown. The word myth comes from the Greek mythos, meaning story or word. In ancient Greece, mythos was simply the act of telling, the breath that carried a truth too large for ordinary speech. It did not suggest falsehood or fantasy, as the word sometimes implies today, but rather a sacred narrative, a story that explained what logic alone could not reach. The Greeks understood that some truths are best expressed through poetry, through symbols, through the lives of gods who embodied forces no mortal could comprehend. Mythos stood alongside logos, the rational word, and both were necessary for understanding existence. Over the centuries, as science gained authority, myth became synonymous with something untrue, though that was never its original meaning. Yet even now, when we speak of someone being mythic in stature, we reach back toward that older sense, the sense that certain stories transcend fact and touch something eternal. Words carry their history within them like sediment in stone. Myths were not meant to be literally true, but to be deeply meaningful. When the ancient Egyptians told of Ra sailing across the sky in a golden boat, they were not making a scientific claim. And when the Norse spoke of the world tree Yggdrasil, they were not describing a plant that could be visited. These stories were understood as symbolic expressions of realities too vast for ordinary language to contain. The sun's journey was a truth about renewal and the cycle of life. The world tree was a truth about the interconnectedness of all realms, and the hero's descent into the underworld was a truth about facing the darkest parts of oneself and returning transformed. Modern minds sometimes struggle with this distinction, expecting ancient peoples either to have believed their myths literally or to have known they were fictions. But myth lives in a space between these positions. It speaks through metaphor to the deepest parts of the human heart. Meaning, not fact, was always the goal. The oldest known myth may be the Epic of Gilgamesh, written over 4,000 years ago. Pressed into clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells the story of a king who sought to conquer death itself, and who discovered that immortality was not for mortals to possess. The tale begins with Gilgamesh as a tyrant, feared by his own people, until the gods create a wild man named Enkidu to be his equal and his friend. Together they slay monsters and achieve great deeds, but when Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is shattered by grief and sets out on a journey to find eternal life. He crosses the waters of death, meets the one man who survived a great flood, and comes agonizingly close to his goal, only to have it slip away. The epic survives because scribes across generations believed it was worth copying, worth passing on. Its themes of friendship, mortality, and meaning still resonate after 4 millennia. Some stories are old enough to feel eternal. Flood myths appear in nearly every ancient civilization, from Mesopotamia to the Americas. Across the world, from the Tigris and Euphrates to the Ganges, from the Mediterranean to the Andes, cultures that never met have told similar stories of a great deluge that once covered the earth and wiped away nearly all life, with only a few survivors chosen to begin the world anew. In Mesopotamia, it was Utnapishtim who built a boat. In the Hebrew tradition, it was Noah. In Hindu mythology, Manu was warned by a fish. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulated the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders. Some scholars wonder whether these tales preserve a memory of real floods at the end of the last ice age, when sea levels rose and coastal lands vanished. Others suggest that floods, being universal disasters, simply became universal metaphors for destruction and renewal. Whatever their origin, flood myths speak to humanity's awareness of its own fragility. Myths were often used to explain natural phenomena before science. Before there were telescopes to study the stars or seismographs to measure earthquakes, before any human understood the physics of lightning, people looked at the world with wonder and needed explanations for what they saw. Thunder became the hammer of Thor striking giants in the clouds, or Zeus hurling bolts from Olympus. The changing seasons were explained by Persephone's descent into the underworld each winter and her return each spring. Volcanoes erupted because a goddess raged beneath the mountain, and the tides rose at the command of ocean gods. These explanations were not naive guesses, but attempts to make sense of a frightening world, to give natural forces personality and intention, to believe the universe could be honored and appeased. In many ways, science carries on this project through different methods, still searching for patterns in the chaos. The questions have not changed, only the tools we use. And from the origins of myth itself, we now turn to the gods who dwelt atop the highest mountains of ancient Greece. The Greek gods lived on Mount Olympus, a peak often hidden by clouds. Mount Olympus is a real mountain in northern Greece, the highest peak in the land, its summit so often shrouded in mist that it must have seemed like the dwelling place for beings more than human. The Greeks imagined their gods feasting there in golden halls, drinking nectar and eating ambrosia, gazing down at mortals with amusement and occasional compassion. Unlike the distant deities of some traditions, the Olympians were intensely personal, flawed, and passionate, capable of love and rage that would not have seemed out of place in any Greek village. They argued, they schemed, they fell in love with mortals and punished those who offended them, yet they remained immortal and powerful beyond anything human. The clouds that veiled Olympus were a curtain between worlds, a reminder that the gods were both present in nature and forever beyond reach. Every storm across that summit hinted at something divine stirring above. Zeus, the king of the gods, wielded thunderbolts forged by the Cyclopes. In the tales of ancient Greece, Zeus rose to power by leading his siblings in war against the Titans, the older generation of gods who had ruled before them. His most fearsome weapon was the thunderbolt, a blazing shaft of destruction that could shatter mountains and reduce any enemy to ash. These bolts were not made by Zeus himself, but forged by the Cyclopes, giant one-eyed smiths who worked at furnaces deep beneath the earth, hammering out divine weapons amid rivers of molten metal. When Zeus was pleased, the sky was clear. When he was angered, storms rolled across the land and lightning split the heavens, each flash a reminder of his authority. The Greeks would have heard thunder and seen in it the voice of their king, the father of gods and men, the one who maintained order among chaotic forces. Power in mythology is rarely abstract. It becomes something you can hear crashing across the night sky. Hera, queen of the heavens, was both goddess of marriage and avenger of unfaithfulness. Hera sat beside Zeus on the throne of Olympus, his wife and equal in dignity if not always in power. She was the protector of marriage, the guardian of the sacred bond between husband and wife, honored at weddings. Yet the myths also paint her as a figure of jealousy, for Zeus was inconstant in his affections, fathering children with mortals and goddesses alike, and Hera's wrath was terrible. She pursued her husband's lovers with relentless fury, transforming them into beasts, driving them to madness. Modern readers sometimes see her as cruel, but the ancient Greeks may have understood something subtler, a goddess who embodied the fierce protectiveness of the marriage bond, the pain of betrayal made divine. Her anger was not senseless. It was the anger of every wife whose trust had been broken. In Hera, marriage was both sacred and dangerous. Athena was born fully grown from the head of Zeus. According to the myth, Zeus learned of a prophecy that any child born to the goddess Medes would be greater than its father, so in fear he swallowed Medes whole. But the child continued to grow, and soon Zeus was racked with an unbearable headache, so intense he commanded Hephaestus to split his skull with an axe. From the cleft emerged Athena, fully grown and clad in armor, with a war cry that shook the heavens. She became the goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts, honored above all in Athens, which bore her name and housed the Parthenon. Unlike Ares, who represented the chaos of battle, Athena embodied strategic warfare, the intelligence that wins victories without unnecessary bloodshed. Her birth from Zeus's head symbolized her nature, a goddess of the mind rather than the passions. She remains one of mythology's most enduring figures, a reminder that strength and wisdom are not opposites. Poseidon ruled not only the sea, but also earthquakes. The brother of Zeus claimed dominion over all waters, from the smallest stream to the endless ocean, but his power extended further than the waves. The Greeks called him the Earth Shaker, believing that when the ground trembled beneath their feet, it was Poseidon stirring in his underwater palace, striking the seabed with his great trident. Sailors prayed to him before every voyage, offering sacrifices and speaking his name with respect, for the sea could turn from calm to murderous in moments at his whim. His moods were as changeable as the tides, generous one moment and wrathful the next, and those who offended him found their ships dashed against rocks or swallowed by storms. Yet he was also a creator, credited with giving humanity the horse. Coastal cities built temples to him on cliff tops where the spray reached the altars. The sea remembers every prayer spoken into its winds. Hades was not considered evil, only inevitable. Unlike the devils of later religions, Hades was not a figure of malice, but simply the keeper of what must come to all living things. When the three brothers divided the cosmos after the war against the Titans, Zeus took the sky, Poseidon claimed the sea, and Hades received the realm beneath the earth, the shadowy kingdom where souls went after death. He ruled this domain with stern fairness, neither cruel nor kind, simply implacable, like death itself. The Greeks rarely spoke his name aloud, calling him the Rich One or the Host of Many, for all mortals would eventually become his guests. His kingdom was not a place of punishment, but a dim and quiet existence, a fading of all that had once been vibrant. He seldom left his underground palace, and when he did, it was to collect what was rightfully his. In the end, everyone arrives at his doorstep. Even heroes descended to walk his silent halls. And in the shadows, beneath Olympus, stranger beings waited, creatures born of fear and wonder. The Minotaur was half man and half bull, trapped in a labyrinth beneath Crete. Born from a curse placed upon the royal house of Crete, the Minotaur was a creature of terrible appearance and hunger, with the body of a powerful man and the head of a great bull. King Minos, ashamed of this monstrous stepson, commissioned the craftsman Daedalus to build a prison from which no creature could escape, a maze of winding passages so complex that anyone who entered would wander until they perished. There the Minotaur dwelt in darkness, fed on human sacrifices from Athens, 7 young men and 7 young women every 9 years, their screams echoing through corridors that led nowhere. The labyrinth became a symbol of the mind's own tangled depths, the places within us that hold our darkest hungers. It was the hero Theseus who finally descended into that maze, armed with a sword and a thread to guide him back. Some prisons are built not with walls, but with confusion itself. Medusa was once beautiful, cursed to turn all who gazed upon her into stone. In the oldest versions of her story, Medusa was a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty, a priestess in the temple of Athena whose loveliness attracted the attention of Poseidon. What followed was a tragedy, for the god violated her in the sacred space of the temple, and it was Medusa, not her attacker, whom Athena punished. The goddess transformed her hair into writhing snakes, her fair face into something so terrible that any living creature who looked upon it would turn instantly to stone. Banished to a lonely island at the edge of the world, Medusa became a monster feared by all, surrounded by the stone figures of heroes who had sought her head. Her story speaks to the cruelty often visited upon victims, the way beauty can become a curse. When Perseus finally slew her, even her severed head retained its deadly power. Some gazes carry more than the eye can hold. The Hydra regrew 2 heads for every one that was cut off. This serpentine beast dwelt in the swamps of Lerna, a creature of poison and endless regeneration, its very breath toxic enough to kill. When Hercules arrived to slay it as one of his 12 labors, he discovered that brute strength would not suffice. For each head he severed was replaced by 2 more, the stumps sprouting fresh horrors with each blow. The battle seemed hopeless until his nephew Iolaus thought to cauterize each wound with fire the moment a head was removed, sealing the flesh before it could multiply. Even then, the monster's central head was immortal and had to be buried beneath a massive boulder, still alive, still conscious, still hissing in the darkness below. The Hydra became a symbol of problems that grow worse the more directly you attack them, challenges that demand cleverness rather than force. Some enemies cannot be defeated on their own terms. And as you rest, with these ancient beings still lingering in your mind, there is no need to hold onto any of them. Let them pass through you like shadows in torchlight. Take a breath if you wish, and let your body settle a little deeper into the stillness. Cerberus, the 3-headed hound, guarded the gates of the underworld. At the entrance to the realm of Hades, where the living world ended and the kingdom of the dead began, there waited a watchdog unlike any other. Cerberus stood eternal guard, his 3 great heads alert to every approaching soul, his serpent tail coiling behind him in the darkness. His purpose was simple but absolute. The dead could enter the underworld, but none could leave. He greeted new arrivals with something almost like affection, for they were meant to be there, but any shade who attempted to escape met his savage fangs with terrifying fury. Only a handful of living mortals ever passed him, and each required exceptional means. Whether Orpheus soothed him with divine music, Hercules wrestled him into submission, or Aeneas bribed him with drugged honeycakes. The three heads were said to see past, present, and future. No one truly knows what thoughts move behind those 6 watchful eyes. The Sphinx posed riddles to travelers and devoured those who failed. On the road to the ancient city of Thebes, there crouched a creature with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a woman, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. She had been sent by the gods to punish the city, and her method was elegant in its cruelty. She posed a riddle to every traveler who sought to pass, and those who could not answer were killed and consumed. For years the road ran red with the blood of the clever and the foolish alike, until Oedipus arrived and heard her question, "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?" His answer, "A human being who crawls as a baby, walks upright in maturity, and uses a cane in old age," broke her power forever. Unable to bear being outwitted, the Sphinx hurled herself from the cliff and perished. The riddle was about us all along. We are the answer we spend our lives discovering. Pegasus, the winged horse, was born from the blood of Medusa. When Perseus severed the head of the Gorgon, something miraculous emerged from the terrible wound, something that bore no trace of her monstrousness. Pegasus sprang forth fully formed, a horse of gleaming white with powerful wings that could carry him higher than any eagle, born from death, yet embodying life and freedom. Some stories say he was the child Medusa had carried since her violation by Poseidon, finally released when she died. The winged horse became a symbol of poetic inspiration and was said to have created sacred springs wherever his hooves struck the earth, including the Hippocrene fountain on Mount Helicon, where the Muses gathered. The hero Bellerophon later tamed Pegasus with a golden bridle given by Athena and rode him into battle against the Chimera, though his pride eventually led him to fall when he tried to reach Olympus itself. Beauty can emerge from the darkest origins. The phoenix dies in flames, only to be reborn from its own ashes. Of all the mythical creatures that have captured human imagination across the ages, perhaps none speaks more directly to our deepest hopes than the phoenix. This magnificent bird, described as resembling an eagle with feathers of brilliant gold and crimson red, lived for 500 years before building a nest of aromatic spices and setting itself ablaze. From those very flames, from the ashes of its own destruction, a new phoenix would rise, young and renewed, to begin the cycle once again. The Greeks learned of this bird from ancient Egyptian sources, where it was associated with the sun god Ra and the daily miracle of dawn breaking over the horizon. Its story became a symbol of resurrection, of the possibility that endings are not truly final, that what seems destroyed may return transformed and beautiful. In every ending waits the seed of a new beginning. From fire comes renewal. The sirens sang so beautifully that sailors forgot everything but the desire to reach them. On rocky islands in treacherous waters, there dwelt creatures whose voices were more dangerous than any storm. The sirens were sometimes depicted as birds with women's faces, sometimes as women with fish tails, but their appearance mattered less than their song, a melody so entrancing that men who heard it would abandon all reason, steering their ships toward the rocks and certain death. The shores of their islands were littered with the bones of sailors who had succumbed to that fatal beauty. When Odysseus passed on his long voyage home, he ordered his men to plug their ears with wax and bind him to the mast so he could hear the song without being able to follow it, the only mortal ever to hear their music and survive. What they sang of, Homer does not say. The most seductive dangers are those that promise exactly what the heart desires. And beyond the creatures, there were heroes, mortals who dared to challenge fate itself. Hercules completed 12 impossible labors to atone for a crime he committed in madness. The greatest hero of Greek mythology was also the most tragic, for Hercules was driven mad by the goddess Hera, and in his frenzy, he killed his own wife and children. When his sanity returned and he understood what he had done, his grief was boundless, and he sought purification through service, agreeing to perform any tasks commanded by King Eurystheus. What followed were 12 labors of escalating impossibility, slaying the Nemean lion whose hide no weapon could pierce, destroying the many-headed Hydra, capturing beasts and fetching treasures from the edges of the known world, and finally descending into the underworld to drag Cerberus into the light of day. Each labor seemed designed to kill him, yet Hercules endured, his suffering becoming a path toward redemption. Strength alone could not save him. Only endurance and humility could restore his soul. Odysseus wandered for 10 years, trying to return home from the Trojan War. After the fall of Troy, most of the Greek heroes sailed home within weeks, but Odysseus was destined to wander for a decade, his journey cursed by Poseidon whom he had offended. His travels took him past the land of the Lotus Eaters, where his men nearly forgot their homeland, into the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus, past the enchantress Circe who turned sailors into swine, and between the monster Scylla and the whirlpool Charybdis. He heard the sirens sing and survived, visited the underworld to speak with the dead, and lost every one of his companions before finally washing ashore alone on the island of Calypso. Throughout it all, he longed for only one thing: his home in Ithaca, his wife Penelope, and the son who had grown up without him. His story became the archetype for every journey that teaches more through hardship than through triumph. The longest way home reveals who we truly are. Achilles was invulnerable except for his heel, where his mother held him when she dipped him in the river Styx. When Achilles was born, his mother Thetis was determined to make her son immortal, and so she carried him to the river Styx, whose waters could grant invulnerability to any flesh they touched. She held him by the heel and dipped him into the dark current, and everywhere the water flowed, his skin became impervious to blade or arrow or any weapon forged by mortal hands. But the heel she gripped remained dry, mortal, vulnerable. Achilles grew to become the greatest warrior of his age, feared by every army, yet knowing always that death waited for him somewhere. In the final days of the Trojan War, an arrow guided by the god Apollo found that single unprotected spot, and the mightiest of heroes fell. His name endures in the phrase we still use today, a reminder that even the strongest among us carries a hidden weakness. No armor is ever complete. Orpheus descended into the underworld to retrieve his beloved Eurydice. Orpheus was the greatest musician who ever lived, his music so beautiful that stones wept and rivers changed their course to hear him play. When his wife Eurydice died from a serpent's bite on their wedding day, his grief was so profound that he resolved to do what no living mortal had ever done: descend into the realm of Hades and bring back the dead. His lyre charmed the ferryman Charon, silenced Cerberus, and moved even the cold heart of Persephone to tears. Hades agreed to release Eurydice on one condition: Orpheus must walk ahead of her and not look back until they reached the upper world. He climbed through the darkness, hearing her footsteps behind him, until just before they emerged into the light, his love overcame his will and he turned. In that instant, she was gone forever. Some losses cannot be undone. Love and trust are not always the same thing. Perseus slew Medusa by looking only at her reflection. Perseus was sent to retrieve the head of Medusa by a king who hoped the quest would kill him, for no hero had ever returned from facing the Gorgon whose gaze turned flesh to cold stone. The gods favored Perseus, granting him winged sandals, a cap of invisibility, a sickle of adamantine, and a polished bronze shield that shone like a mirror. He found Medusa sleeping among her sisters on their lonely island at the edge of the world, the floor around them littered with the stone forms of those who had looked upon her face. Rather than face her eyes, Perseus watched only her reflection in the mirror-bright surface of his shield, and with one swift strike, he severed her head without ever meeting her deadly gaze. From her blood sprang Pegasus, and her head remained a weapon even in death, a terror to all who faced it. Sometimes the only way to defeat an enemy is to refuse to face them on their own terms. Theseus navigated the labyrinth using nothing but a ball of thread. When Theseus volunteered to be one of the youths sacrificed to the Minotaur, he did not intend to die in that endless darkness. Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, had fallen in love with him and gave him a gift before he entered the maze, a ball of thread that he could unwind as he walked, marking his path through the corridors where so many had perished before him. Theseus descended into the labyrinth alone, found the beast waiting at its heart, and slew it with his bare hands or perhaps a sword hidden by Ariadne. Then he followed the thread back out, emerging from the maze that had consumed countless others before him. The story endures because it reveals a truth about the most complex problems we face. Sometimes the solution is not strength or cleverness, but the simplest tool and the courage to keep moving forward. The thread of hope is always worth holding. Jason sailed with the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece. Jason was a prince robbed of his throne by his own uncle, and to reclaim his birthright, he was tasked with fetching an impossible prize, the Golden Fleece, a ram's skin of pure shining gold that hung in a sacred grove at the edge of the known world, guarded by a dragon that never slept. He gathered the greatest heroes of his age aboard the ship Argo: Hercules himself, Orpheus the divine musician, the twins Castor and Pollux who could never be separated, and dozens more, each a legend in their own right. Their voyage took them through clashing rocks that crushed ships to splinters, past bronze giants that hurled boulders, and into lands where no Greek had ever sailed. When Jason reached the fleece at last, it was the sorceress Medea who helped him claim it, her love for him becoming both his salvation and his eventual doom. Not all treasures are worth what they cost. And while Greek heroes sought glory, another civilization told stories of a very different kind of divinity. The Romans adopted Greek gods, but gave them Latin names. When Rome rose to power and encountered the sophisticated culture of Greece, it did not reject the Greek gods but embraced them fully, recognizing in Zeus their own sky father Jupiter, in Ares their war god Mars, and in Aphrodite their goddess of love Venus. This was not simple copying, but a profound cultural fusion, as the Romans added their own character to these borrowed deities, making them more stern, more disciplined, and more concerned with duty and the state than with personal passion. The Greek gods had been wild and unpredictable. The Roman versions were often more formal and civic-minded. Over time, the two divine traditions blended so thoroughly that it became difficult to separate them, and both are remembered together as classical mythology. One civilization's gods became another civilization's inheritance. Names change, but the stories endure across the ages. Jupiter was Zeus, Mars was Ares, and Venus was Aphrodite. The correspondences between Greek and Roman gods were not always exact, but certain pairings became so established that they are now inseparable in our cultural memory. Jupiter inherited all the majesty and thunderbolts of Zeus, ruling over gods and mortals alike from his celestial throne. Mars took on the war domains of Ares, though the Romans honored him far more than the Greeks had honored his counterpart, for Rome was a civilization built on military conquest and glory. Venus, like Aphrodite, embodied love and beauty, but she also became the divine mother of the Roman people through her son Aeneas, the refugee from Troy, connecting desire itself to the destiny of an empire. These names are still with us today in the planets that wander across our night sky, distant worlds, named for gods who once seemed closer than the stars. The heavens remember what we called them. Janus, the god of doorways, had two faces looking in opposite directions. Unlike the borrowed Greek gods, Janus was uniquely Roman, a deity with no Greek equivalent. the god of beginnings, transitions, and endings. He was depicted with two faces, one looking forward into the future and one gazing back at the past, which made him the perfect deity to preside over doorways, gates, and passages of all kinds. Every entrance and exit was sacred to him. Every moment of change and transformation fell under his watchful protection. The Romans named the first month of their calendar after him, January, a time when the old year is remembered and the new year lies ahead, stretching into the unknown. Temples to Janus were kept open in times of war and closed only during the rare seasons of peace across the empire. He reminds us that every threshold we cross makes us someone different than we were before. To step forward, we must also let go. Romulus and Remus, founders of Rome, were raised by a she-wolf. According to Roman legend, the twin brothers Romulus and Remus were born to a priestess and the god Mars himself, but their great uncle, fearing they would one day claim his throne, ordered them thrown into the flooding Tiber River to drown as helpless infants. The basket carrying them washed ashore at the base of the Palatine Hill, where a she-wolf discovered the crying infants and nursed them as her own, keeping them alive until a shepherd found and raised them as his sons. When they grew to manhood and learned their true origins, they killed their great uncle and decided to found a new city, but they quarreled bitterly over its location and name, and Romulus killed his brother in the dispute. The city built upon that fratricide was named Rome, and its strength was forever marked by the violence of its beginning. Even the mightiest empires are born from human frailty. The Vestal Virgins kept a sacred flame burning for the safety of Rome. In the heart of Rome stood the temple of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and within that sacred temple burned a fire that was never allowed to go out under any circumstances whatsoever. The Vestals, priestesses chosen as young girls and sworn to 30 years of celibacy, tended this sacred flame day and night, for it was believed that if the fire ever died, Rome itself would fall into ruin. These women held extraordinary status in a society dominated by men. They could own property, give testimony in court, and were treated with immense respect wherever they went. But the price of failure was terrible. A Vestal who let the flame die could be beaten, and one who broke her vow of chastity was buried alive. The fire they guarded was the symbolic heart of the empire, a light that burned for over 1,000 years. Some duties require a lifetime of devotion and sacrifice. The Romans believed spirits called Lares protected every household. While the great gods were honored in temples, the Romans also believed in smaller, more intimate spirits who dwelt within their very homes. The Lares were guardian spirits, often depicted as dancing youths, who protected the household and all who lived within it. Every Roman home had a small shrine called a lararium, where the family would make daily offerings of food and wine to these protective beings, asking for their continued blessing and favor. The Lares were not distant or fearsome, but familiar, almost like ancestral spirits who had never truly left the family they loved. On important occasions, birthdays, weddings, safe returns from journeys, special offerings were made to thank them. The divine, for the Romans, was not only found in grand temples, but in the quiet corners of daily life. Home was a sacred space where the gods dwelt invisibly among the family. And far to the south, along the banks of the Nile, the gods wore the heads of animals. Ra, the Egyptian sun god, sailed across the sky each day in a golden boat. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not merely a burning sphere, but a god named Ra, who each morning rose in the east aboard a great solar bark and sailed across the vast vault of the heavens, bringing light and life to the world below. In the evening, he descended into the underworld, where he had to battle the serpent Apophis throughout the long night, overcoming chaos itself to be reborn at dawn once more. Every sunrise was a victory, every new day a gift earned through divine struggle in the darkness. The Egyptians watched this daily journey with reverence and awe, understanding that the cosmic order was not automatic, but required constant renewal through eternal conflict. The pharaohs claimed descent from Ra himself, and the sun disk became the supreme symbol of divine power throughout the land. Every dawn was a promise kept, the oldest promise of all. Osiris was killed and dismembered by his brother Set, then resurrected by his wife Isis. Osiris was the beloved king of Egypt, a god who taught humanity agriculture and civilization, but his brother Set grew jealous of his glory and hatched a terrible scheme to destroy him utterly. Set tricked Osiris into lying in a beautifully crafted coffin that fit him perfectly, then sealed it and threw it into the Nile to drown. When the goddess Isis, wife and sister of Osiris, recovered the body, Set found it and tore it into 14 pieces, scattering them across all of Egypt. Isis searched tirelessly, gathering every fragment, and with her magic, she restored her husband just long enough for them to conceive a son, Horus, who would avenge his father. Osiris descended to become the lord of the underworld, the judge of all souls who passed beyond. His story of death and resurrection became central to Egyptian belief. Even the divine can be broken and made whole. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, weighed the hearts of the dead. In the hall of judgment beneath the earth, where every soul arrived after death, it was Anubis who conducted the most important test of all existence. The black-furred, jackal-headed god would carefully place the deceased's heart upon one side of a great golden scale, and on the other side would rest the feather of Maat, the symbol of truth and cosmic justice. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul had lived a righteous life and could proceed to the eternal paradise of the field of reeds. But if the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by the monstrous Ammit, a fearsome creature part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, and the soul would cease to exist forever. There was no forgiveness for the wicked in this silent hole, no second chance, no appeal to higher mercy. The Egyptians believed your actions mattered beyond death. The heart remembers all. The Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of the soul. When the Egyptians mummified their dead, they took great care to preserve certain organs in canopic jars, but the brain was considered entirely worthless, merely a mass of tissue to be pulled out through the nose and discarded. The heart, however, was sacred, the one organ left inside the body, because it was believed to be the center of intelligence, emotion, memory, and personality, everything that made a person who they truly were. The heart would speak for the deceased in the afterlife, confessing or denying sins before the assembled gods. If it lied, it would betray itself by its weight. The Egyptians understood that we carry something essential within our chests, something that pounds faster when we are afraid and aches when we grieve. They were not so wrong to call it the soul. We still speak of hearts that are broken and hearts that are healed. Thoth, the ibis-headed god, invented writing and kept the records of all things. Thoth was the god of wisdom, magic, and writing, depicted with the head of an ibis or sometimes as a baboon, and he was credited with giving humanity one of its very greatest gifts, the written word itself. Before Thoth, knowledge could only be passed down through speech and memory, imperfect and easily lost to time and forgetting. With writing, thoughts could be preserved across generations, laws could be recorded, and the deeds of the dead could be remembered forever. Thoth kept the records of all souls who passed through the Hall of Judgment, noting the outcome of each weighing of the heart with perfect accuracy. He was also said to have written the magical spells that filled the Book of the Dead, guiding souls through the perils of the afterlife. The Egyptians understood that writing was more than marks on papyrus. It was immortality made visible. The scarab beetle symbolized rebirth because it seemed to emerge from nothing. The ancient Egyptians watched the scarab beetle roll balls of dung across the sand and saw in this humble creature a reflection of the sun's journey across the sky. The beetle's habit of laying eggs inside these balls, from which new life later emerged seemingly from nothing, suggested spontaneous creation, life, arising from apparent nothingness. The scarab became a powerful symbol of rebirth and regeneration, associated with the god Khepri, who was believed to push the sun into the sky each morning, just as the beetle pushed its earthen sphere. Scarab amulets were placed over the hearts of the mummified dead to protect them in the afterlife and ensure their resurrection. What others might have seen as merely an insect crawling through the dirt, the Egyptians recognized as a teacher of cosmic truths. The smallest creatures can carry the greatest meanings. The goddess Maat represented truth, balance, and cosmic order. Maat was not merely a goddess, but also a concept, the fundamental principle upon which the entire universe depended. She represented truth, justice, balance, and the proper order of all things, from the movements of the stars to the behavior of mortals in their daily lives. She was depicted as a woman wearing an ostrich feather upon her head, the same feather against which every human heart would be weighed after death in the hall of judgment. The pharaohs claimed to rule in accordance with Maat, and every just law, every fair judgment was said to uphold her eternal principle. When Maat was honored, the world flourished. When she was ignored, chaos threatened to consume everything. The Egyptians understood that order must be actively maintained, that the universe tends toward disorder without conscious effort. Balance is not given freely, it must be earned. And as these Egyptian gods settle into the darkness of your mind, let them rest there like figures in a temple relief. You do not need to remember them. Let them become part of the stillness. Breathe slowly and feel your body grow heavier against whatever holds you. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, was both a destroyer and a healer. Sekhmet was a goddess of terrifying power, depicted with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman, her name meaning the powerful one. In myth, Ra once sent her to punish humanity for its disobedience, and she became so drunk on blood that she nearly wiped out the human race, stopping only when the gods tricked her into drinking beer dyed red to look like blood. Yet this same goddess who embodied destruction was also invoked for healing, for the Egyptians understood that the power to destroy and the power to cure were two sides of the same force. Her priests were physicians, skilled in medicine and surgery. She represented the scorching desert heat that could kill, but also the heat that could purify and sterilize wounds. In Sekhmet, the Egyptians honored the paradox that terror and healing are often inseparable. The same fire that burns can also cleanse. Bastet was a cat goddess who protected homes and brought good fortune. While Sekhmet embodied feline ferocity, Bastet represented its gentler side, the warmth of a cat curled by the fire, the protection of a mother guarding her kittens. Originally depicted as a lioness like her sister goddess, by later periods Bastet had become associated with the domestic cat, those graceful creatures the Egyptians loved so much they mummified them by the thousands. She protected homes from evil spirits and disease, guarded women in childbirth, and brought fertility and joy to those who honored her. Her cult center at Bubastes held festivals that drew hundreds of thousands of revelers from across Egypt, celebrations that lasted for days and nights. The Egyptians saw in their household cats a reflection of divine grace, a small god padding softly through their homes on velvet paws. Even today, cats carry something of that ancient mystery in their eyes. The Book of the Dead was a guide for the soul's journey through the afterlife. When an Egyptian died, their soul faced a perilous journey through the underworld, past gates guarded by demons, through halls where the wrong answer to a question could mean eternal destruction. The Book of the Dead was a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions designed to help the deceased navigate these dangers, a kind of spiritual guidebook tucked into the coffin or painted on tomb walls. Some spells provided the words to speak when confronting fearsome guardians. Others offered protection against serpents or crocodiles lurking in the darkness. The most important sections prepared the soul for the weighing of the heart in the Hall of Judgment. Each book was personalized for its owner, their name inserted into the spells, for these were not generic instructions, but a personal passport through death. The living prepared for death by writing their own guide to the afterlife. And now we travel north, to the frozen lands where the gods prepared for the end of all things. The Norse believed the universe was held together by a great tree called Yggdrasil. At the center of the Norse cosmos stood an ash tree of unimaginable size, its branches stretching through all the 9 worlds, its roots reaching down into the darkest depths of existence. Yggdrasil connected everything: Asgard, the home of the gods, perched in its highest branches; Midgard, the realm of humans, nestled in its trunk; Hel, the land of the dead, coiled around its deepest root. A wise eagle sat at its crown, a venomous serpent gnawed at its base, and a squirrel ran endlessly between them, carrying insults from one to the other. The tree was constantly threatened by the creatures that fed upon it, yet it endured, held together by its own immense vitality and the forces of nature. The Norse saw the universe not as a static creation, but as a living creature, growing and struggling and destined one day to fall. All existence hung from one single tree. Odin sacrificed his eye for wisdom and hung from Yggdrasil for 9 days to learn the runes. The king of the Norse gods was no figure of distant majesty, but a restless wanderer and tireless seeker, willing to suffer any torment in pursuit of knowledge and hidden wisdom. When Odin wished to drink from the well of wisdom at the base of Yggdrasil, the ancient guardian demanded a terrible price, one of his own eyes. Odin plucked it out without hesitation and cast it into those deep, dark waters forever. Later, seeking to learn the secrets of the runes, the magical symbols that held tremendous power over reality itself, Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear, for 9 days and 9 nights, neither eating nor drinking, staring into the abyss until the runes revealed themselves to him in his agony. The Norse valued wisdom above comfort, knowledge above safety. Some truths can only be purchased with suffering and pain. Thor's hammer Mjolnir could level mountains and always returned to his hand. Thor was the mighty defender of both gods and humble humans, a figure of enormous strength who rode across the sky in a chariot pulled by 2 goats, and when he threw his hammer, thunder rolled across the heavens. Mjolnir was forged by dwarven smiths in a contest of craftsmanship. Its handle slightly too short because Loki, ever the troublemaker, had sabotaged the work, yet it remained the most powerful weapon in all the 9 worlds. No matter how far Thor hurled it, the hammer always returned to his hand, and no armor or fortress could withstand its crushing blow. The Norse wore small hammers around their necks as protective amulets, invoking Thor's strength against the dark forces of chaos and destruction. To this day, Thursday bears his name in English, a reminder that the thunder god still rumbles through our language. Some protectors never truly fade away. Loki was a trickster who could change shape and gender at will. Among all the gods of Asgard, none was more unpredictable or dangerous than Loki, who was counted as one of the Aesir, though his father was a giant from the frozen wastes beyond the 9 worlds. Loki could transform himself into a salmon, a fly, a mare, or an old woman, shifting between shapes as easily as others changed clothes, his very nature as fluid as water. Sometimes his tricks benefited the gods, as when his mischief led to the creation of many of their greatest treasures, including Thor's hammer itself. Other times his cunning brought disaster and sorrow, and his pranks grew darker as the ages passed. It was Loki who engineered the death of Balder, the most beloved of the gods, and for this unforgivable crime, he was bound beneath the earth with a serpent dripping venom on his face until the end of days. The line between clever and dangerous is thinner than we like to believe. The Valkyries chose which warriors would die in battle and be taken to Valhalla. On every battlefield where warriors clashed and fell in the din of war, The Valkyries rode unseen through the chaos, selecting those whose courage had earned them a place among the honored dead. These fierce and beautiful maidens served Odin directly, and the warriors they chose were carried to Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, where they would feast each night and fight each day, preparing for the final battle at the end of the world. To die in battle with a Valkyrie watching was the highest honor a Norse warrior could hope for, far better than fading away in illness or the weakness of old age. The Valkyries were beautiful and terrible, their armor gleaming as they descended from the clouds on flying horses with manes like silver and eyes like fire. Death, for those they favored, was not an ending but a promotion. The bravest were recruited for eternity. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, was a prophecy of the world's destruction and rebirth. Unlike many mythologies that promised eternal paradise or endless cycles, the Norse looked forward to an ending, a final battle in which the forces of order and chaos would destroy each other utterly and completely. Ragnarok would begin with 3 terrible winters with no summer between them, followed by the breaking of all bonds, as monsters escaped their prisons and giants marched on Asgard with fire and sword. Odin would fall to the wolf Fenrir. Thor would slay the Midgard serpent but die from its deadly venom. The sun would be swallowed, the stars would fall, and the earth would sink into the cold sea. Yet the prophecy did not end there, for after the destruction, a new world would rise from the waters, green and fresh and pure, and the children of the gods would begin again. Even total annihilation contains within itself the seeds of renewal. Fenrir was a wolf so terrible that the gods bound him with a chain forged from impossible things. The wolf Fenrir was the monstrous son of Loki, and from his birth the gods saw in him a terror that would one day devour the world itself. They tried to bind him with chains of iron, but he snapped them like thin threads. At last, they commissioned the dwarves to forge Gleipnir, a ribbon that looked delicate as silk, but was made from impossibilities: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. These things do not exist in our world, which is why Gleipnir could never be broken. Fenrir sensed the trap and would only allow the binding if a god placed a hand in his mouth as surety. Tyr, the brave war god, volunteered and lost his hand when the wolf discovered he could not escape. Fenrir waits still, his jaws bound shut, until the day Ragnarok sets him free. The Midgard serpent encircled the entire world, biting its own tail. Another of Loki's monstrous children, the Midgard serpent, was cast into the ocean by Odin, where it grew so enormous that it encircled the entire world. Its body coiled beneath the waves, its massive jaws clamped upon its own tail. This image of the serpent eating itself, called the Ouroboros, appears in cultures around the world as a symbol of eternity and the endless cycle of destruction and renewal. The serpent's grip held the world together, yet the Norse knew that one day it would release its tail and rise from the depths, and that would be the beginning of Ragnarok. Thor and the serpent were destined enemies, fated to destroy each other in the final battle at the end of all things. Until that day, the great serpent sleeps beneath the waters, its coils wrapped around the foundations of reality. Some bonds hold everything together, even as they threaten to tear it apart. And from the icy north, we turn eastward to lands where gods danced and the cosmos was born from sound. In Hindu mythology, Brahma creates the universe, Vishnu preserves it, and Shiva destroys it. The Hindu understanding of the cosmos operates through a trinity of supreme deities, each responsible for one aspect of the eternal cycle. Brahma brings forth creation, drawing the universe into being from the cosmic void. Vishnu maintains and preserves what has been created, descending to earth in various avatars whenever the balance between good and evil tilts too far toward destruction. And Shiva, often misunderstood as merely a destroyer, dissolves the universe so that it may be reborn, For in Hindu thought, destruction is not an end, but a necessary transformation. Together, these three gods represent the cycle that governs all existence: creation, preservation, dissolution, and recreation, stretching through unimaginable spans of cosmic time. The universe breathes in and out across billions of years. Each ending is simply another beginning. The sound Om is believed to be the vibration from which the universe emerged. Before there was light, before there was matter, before there was anything at all, there was sound, a single sacred syllable that vibrated through the void and set creation in motion. Om is considered the primordial vibration, the cosmic hum that underlies all of existence, the frequency from which everything emerged and to which everything will eventually return. When devotees chant this syllable, they are believed to be aligning themselves with the fundamental nature of reality itself. The three sounds that make up Om, A, U, and M represent creation, preservation, and dissolution, the entire cycle of existence compressed into a single breath. Scientists today speak of the cosmic microwave background radiation, the echo of the Big Bang still humming through the universe. Perhaps the ancients heard something similar in their contemplation. The universe may indeed have begun with a sound. Vishnu has incarnated on earth 10 times, including as Rama and Krishna. Whenever the world falls into chaos and righteousness is threatened, Vishnu descends from the heavens to restore balance, taking a form appropriate to the crisis at hand. These incarnations, called avatars, include Matsya the fish, who saved the first man from a great flood; Varaha the boar, who lifted the earth from cosmic waters; Narasimha the man-lion, who defeated an unkillable demon; and most beloved of all, Rama the perfect prince, and Krishna the divine cowherd, whose teachings form the heart of the sacred Bhagavad Gita. 9 avatars have already appeared throughout the ages, and devout Hindus still await the 10th, Kalki, who will come at the end of the current age, riding a white horse to destroy evil forever and usher in a new golden era. The divine does not merely watch from far away, but enters the world again and again to redeem it. Salvation comes down to meet us where we are. Shiva's dance, the Tandava, both destroys and recreates the cosmos. Shiva is often depicted as Nataraja, the Lord of Dance, performing the Tandava within a ring of cosmic fire. This dance is no mere entertainment, but the very mechanism by which the universe is sustained and transformed. With one foot crushing the demon of ignorance and another raised in the gesture of liberation, Shiva dances the rhythm that keeps all things in motion. When the dance grows wild and fierce, creation dissolves into its component energies. When it softens into grace, new worlds emerge from the cosmic dust. The Tandava represents the eternal truth that the universe is not a fixed object, but a dynamic process, an endless dance of energy transforming from one form to another. Modern physics speaks of particles winking in and out of existence, of energy becoming matter and matter becoming energy. Shiva has been dancing this truth since before time began. Ganesha, the elephant-headed god, removes obstacles and is invoked at new beginnings. Of all the Hindu deities, none is more beloved than Ganesha, the elephant-headed god whose image graces the entrances of homes and businesses throughout India and beyond. According to legend, Shiva beheaded the boy who guarded his wife's chamber, not knowing it was his own son, and in remorse replaced his head with that of the first creature found, an elephant. Rather than diminishing him, this transformation granted Ganesha unique gifts: the wisdom of the elephant, the large ears to listen carefully, the small eyes to concentrate, and the trunk that can remove any obstacle from one's path. Before any new venture, before any journey, before any important undertaking, Hindus invoke Ganesha to clear the way ahead. He is the Lord of beginnings and the remover of obstacles. Every ending leads to a new start, and Ganesha waits at every threshold. The Ramayana tells the story of Rama's quest to rescue his wife from a demon king. Rama was a prince of Ayodhya, the seventh avatar of Vishnu born into human form, whose life would become an eternal model of righteousness and devotion. When his beloved wife Sita was abducted by Ravana, the 10-headed demon king of Lanka, Rama embarked on an epic journey to rescue her, aided by his devoted brother Lakshmana and the monkey warrior Hanuman, whose loyalty and strength became legendary. The Ramayana is not merely an adventure tale, but a meditation on duty, honor, sacrifice, and the bonds between husband and wife, brother and brother, master and servant. Its sacred verses have been recited across South and Southeast Asia for over 2,000 years, shaping moral understanding and inspiring countless works of art, music, and literature. The story of Rama and Sita endures because it speaks to timeless truths about love, devotion, and sacrifice. The Mahabharata contains over 100,000 verses and is the longest epic ever written. The Mahabharata is not merely an epic, but an entire world of stories, philosophies, and teachings woven around the central narrative of a catastrophic war between two branches of a royal family. At over 100,000 verses, it dwarfs the Iliad and Odyssey combined, containing within its pages everything from battlefield tactics to moral philosophy to recipes for medicine. Embedded within the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most influential spiritual texts ever written, in which Krishna counsels the warrior Arjuna on the nature of duty, action, and the soul. The epic claims of itself that whatever is found here may be found elsewhere, but what is not found here exists nowhere. It is a mirror reflecting the totality of human experience. Every drama we know, every conflict we face, has already been explored within its verses. And as we remain in the East, we find myths where dragons bring rain and balance rules all things. In Chinese mythology, dragons are benevolent creatures associated with water and the emperor. Unlike the fearsome fire-breathing monsters of European legend, the dragons of China are wise and benevolent creatures, bringers of rain and guardians of waterways, symbols of power, strength, and good fortune. The Chinese dragon is a composite being, the body of a serpent, the claws of an eagle, the horns of a deer, the whiskers of a catfish, representing the union of all creatures under heaven. For thousands of years, the dragon was the exclusive symbol of the emperor, who was called the Son of Heaven and believed to possess the dragon's authority over the natural world. Temples were built to dragon kings who controlled the rivers and seas. Farmers prayed to them for rain in times of drought. To this day, dragon dances celebrate the Lunar New Year, inviting prosperity for the months ahead. These dragons do not hoard gold, but share abundance. The Jade Emperor rules over heaven and all the gods in Chinese tradition. At the summit of the celestial bureaucracy sits the Jade Emperor, ruler of heaven and overseer of all the gods, spirits, and immortals. His court mirrors the imperial court of ancient China, complete with ministers, generals, and countless officials, each responsible for some aspect of the mortal world, from the god of literature to the god of wealth to the city gods who watch over individual towns. The Jade Emperor holds court to hear reports from these celestial officials and dispenses rewards and punishments accordingly. According to legend, he was once a mortal prince who cultivated virtue through over 3,000 lifetimes before achieving his exalted position. His story teaches that even the highest throne in all the heavens was earned through patience and perseverance over countless ages. The celestial realm above mirrors the earthly realm below. The Chinese zodiac is based on a race among 12 animals to reach the Jade Emperor. According to legend, the Jade Emperor decided to name the years after animals and held a great race to determine the order. The clever rat hitched a ride on the ox but leaped ahead at the last moment to win, which is why the rat year comes first. The ox came second, followed by the tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. The cat, tricked by the rat into missing the race entirely, has been chasing rats ever since in eternal vengeance. Each animal was believed to impart its characteristics to the people born in its year, so those born in the year of the dragon are said to be powerful and lucky, while those born in the year of the pig are considered generous and kind. Even today, the Chinese zodiac shapes important decisions about marriage, business, and birth timing. A race held once in myth still determines fortunes today. The Monkey King, Sun Wukong, caused havoc in heaven before becoming a protector of pilgrims. Born from a stone egg on a mountain top, Sun Wukong was no ordinary monkey, but a being of infinite cunning and magical power who mastered the arts of immortality and acquired a staff that could shrink to the size of a needle or grow large enough to touch the sky. In his arrogance, he wreaked havoc in heaven, defeating entire armies of celestial soldiers and eating the peaches of immortality. Not even the Jade Emperor and all his celestial generals could stop him. It took the Buddha himself to trap the Monkey King beneath a mountain for 500 years. Humbled at last, Sun Wukong became the protector of the monk Xuanzang on his epic journey to India to retrieve sacred scriptures, using his powers for good and earning his redemption through service. Pride must fall before wisdom can rise. Even the mightiest can learn humility and find redemption. Yin and Yang represent the balance of opposites that underlies all existence. The familiar symbol of two fish-like shapes, one black and one white, each containing a dot of the other's color, represents one of the most profound insights of Chinese philosophy. Yin is dark, passive, and feminine. Yang is light, active, and masculine. But rather than opposing forces locked in conflict, Yin and Yang are complementary energies that depend upon each other for their very existence. There can be no day without night, no summer without winter, no life without death. The small dots within each half remind us that within every darkness lies the seed of light, and within every light lies the seed of darkness. Chinese medicine, martial arts, and countless other disciplines are based on maintaining the proper balance between these forces within the body and the world. When yin and yang flow in harmony, health and peace follow. All of nature seeks this balance. In Japanese mythology, the sun goddess Amaterasu once hid in a cave and plunged the world into darkness. Amaterasu, the great sun goddess, was said to be the divine ancestor of the Japanese imperial line and the source of all light and life in the world. When her brother Susanoo behaved wildly and disrespectfully, Amaterasu was so offended that she withdrew into a cave and sealed it with a great rock, casting the world into endless night. Without the sun, crops failed, spirits of darkness roamed freely, and all living things began to wither and perish. The gods gathered outside the cave and devised a plan to lure her out. They held a great celebration, and when the goddess Aim-no-Uzum danced so wildly that all the gods burst into laughter, Amaterasu's curiosity overcame her wounded pride. She opened the cave, and the world was filled with blessed light once more. Sometimes the light hides itself, waiting for joy to call it forth. Susanoo, the storm god, was banished from heaven for his wild behavior. Brother to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and Tsukuyomi, the moon god, Susanoo was the god of storms and the sea, as unpredictable and violent as the tempests he commanded. His behavior grew so wild that he destroyed his sister's sacred rice fields, slaughtered her horses, and killed one of her attendants, causing her to withdraw from the world and plunge it into cold darkness. For these grievous crimes, Susanoo was banished from the heavenly realm and forced to wander the earth all alone, far from his divine family. Yet even in exile, the storm god found redemption, slaying an 8-headed serpent that had long been terrorizing the land and rescuing a young maiden from being sacrificed to the terrible beast. Within the serpent's tail, he discovered a magical sword, that remains one of Japan's most sacred treasures to this day. Even chaos may serve a purpose when properly channeled. And as these Eastern gods drift softly through your thoughts, let them move like mist across a mountain. There is no need to follow them. Let your breath slow, let your eyes grow heavy, and allow the stillness to deepen around you. Kitsune are fox spirits in Japanese folklore that can take human form. The kitsune, or fox spirits, are among the most fascinating creatures of Japanese mythology, able to assume human shape and often appearing as beautiful women. These supernatural beings can be benevolent protectors or dangerous tricksters, depending on their nature and inclinations. As a kitsune ages, it grows additional tails, with the most powerful and wise possessing 9 tails and near-divine abilities. Some kitsunes serve Inari, the god of rice and prosperity, guarding shrines and blessing the faithful. Others delight in mischief, leading travelers astray through the forests or seducing mortals only to abandon them. Japanese folklore is filled with stories of men who unknowingly married kitsune wives, only to discover their true spirit nature years later when some accident revealed their hidden tales. The boundary between human and spirit is more porous than we might believe. The Tengu were once feared demons, but later became protective spirits of the mountains. In the earliest Japanese tales, Tengu were terrifying bird-like demons with wings and beaks who led priests astray from the true path and caused mischief and disaster wherever they went. Over the centuries, however, their image transformed dramatically in the minds of the people. They came to be depicted as fierce but noble beings with red faces and long noses, masters of martial arts and guardians of the sacred mountains. Buddhist monks who wandered from the true path might become Tengu after death, their souls trapped between the human and spirit worlds. Warriors who wished to develop supernatural fighting skills would seek out Tengu as their teachers, and some of Japan's greatest swordsmen were said to have trained under these mountain spirits. What was once feared became deeply respected. The monsters of yesterday may become the protectors of tomorrow to us. And from the islands of Japan, we journey westward again to the misty lands where the Celts honored nature and the otherworld. The Celts believed in an otherworld that existed alongside our own. For the Celts of ancient Britain, Ireland, and Gaul, the world was not a single realm but a layered existence where the mundane and the magical interpenetrated constantly. The otherworld, known by various names such as Tur Na Nog or Anun, was a place of eternal youth and abundance, where death did not exist and time flowed differently than in the mortal realm. Certain locations served as sacred doorways between the worlds, including ancient burial mounds, sacred groves, and islands shrouded in mist. At certain times of year, particularly Samhain at the end of October, the boundaries between worlds grew thin enough for spirits to cross. The Celts did not fear this otherworld, but viewed it as an integral part of reality, a place their ancestors had gone, and where they themselves would one day journey. The veil between the worlds has always been thin and permeable. The Druids were keepers of Celtic wisdom, serving as priests, judges, and storytellers. The Druids were the intellectual and spiritual elite of Celtic society, so revered that even kings bowed to their wisdom and judgment. They served not only as priests who conducted sacred rituals, but also as judges who settled disputes, as teachers who preserved the vast body of Celtic knowledge, and as seers who divined the future. Training to become a Druid could take 20 years, during which students memorized thousands of verses and learned the secrets of astronomy, natural philosophy, and the sacred arts. The Druids wrote nothing down, believing that wisdom should be earned through memory and oral tradition rather than simply read from texts. They gathered in sacred groves of oak trees, and the very word Druid may derive from the Celtic word for oak. When Rome conquered the Celtic lands, the Druids were suppressed, and much of their knowledge was lost forever. Cernunnos, the horned god, was lord of animals and the wild places. Depicted with the antlers of a stag and often seated in a cross-legged position surrounded by wild animals, Cernunnos was a god of nature, fertility, and the untamed wilderness that existed beyond the boundaries of human settlements. His image appears on ancient Celtic artifacts across Europe, though his worship was so thoroughly suppressed that little is known of the rituals performed in his honor. He was a lord of the forest and the beasts that dwelt within it, a god of abundance who ensured the success of the hunt and the fertility of herds. Some scholars believe that later European depictions of the Christian devil, with his horns and association with wild places, were influenced by folk memories of Cernunnos and his worship. The wild god still haunts the forests of the imagination. Nature has its own divinity that civilization cannot quite fully forget. The Morrigan was a goddess of war and fate who could appear as a crow. On the battlefields of ancient Ireland, warriors looked to the skies for crows, knowing that where those dark birds gathered, the Morrigan watched and judged them. She was a goddess of war, death, and sovereignty, sometimes appearing as a single terrifying figure, sometimes as three sisters whose combined power shaped the destinies of kings and warriors alike. Before battles, she would sometimes appear to warriors, either encouraging them with prophecies of victory or warning them of their impending doom with terrible certainty. After the fighting ended, she would walk among the slain, claiming her due. Yet the Morrigan was not merely a goddess of destruction. She was also associated with sovereignty and the land itself, connected to the very essence of what it meant to rule Ireland. Her favor could make a king, and her disfavor could unmake him. The Ravens still remember her. The legend of King Arthur may have roots in Celtic mythology. The story of King Arthur, with his round table of noble knights, his magical sword Excalibur, and his enchanted advisor Merlin, has become one of the most enduring legends in Western culture. Yet beneath the medieval trappings of castles and chivalry lie much older Celtic elements. The sword drawn from a stone echoes the sacred relationship between kings and the land in Celtic belief. Merlin bears resemblance to the Druids who advised ancient Celtic chiefs. The quest for the Holy Grail may derive from Welsh legends of magical cauldrons of plenty. Arthur's final journey to Avalon, the mysterious island of apples where he waits to return in Britain's hour of need, recalls the Celtic otherworld across the Western Sea. Whether a real war leader or a purely mythic figure, Arthur carries within him the memory of an older, magical Britain. The once and future king sleeps still. The Tuatha Dé Danann were a race of supernatural beings who once ruled Ireland. According to Irish mythology, before humans came to Ireland, the island was ruled by the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, beings of remarkable beauty and magical power who arrived in Ireland shrouded in mysterious mist. They possessed four great treasures: the Stone of Destiny that would cry out under the rightful king, the Spear of Lugh that never missed its target, the Sword of Nuada that none could escape, and the Cauldron of the Dagda that could feed any company without ever emptying. When human invaders arrived, the Tuatha Dé Danann retreated into the hollow hills and ancient burial mounds, becoming the fairy folk of later Irish legend, still dwelling beneath the green hills and sometimes emerging to interact with mortals. They never truly left Ireland, but simply went underground and became the good people, the fair folk, the Aes Sídhe who still walk beneath the moonlight. And beyond the Celtic lands, in the vast forests of Eastern Europe, another mythology took shape. The Slavs believed in a world divided between Prav, Yav, and Nav, the realms of gods, the living, and the dead. The ancient Slavs understood the cosmos as three interconnected realms. Prav was the world of divine law and the gods, the realm of eternal truth and sacred justice that governed all things. Yav was the visible world where humans lived, the realm of physical reality and everyday experience. Nav was the world of the dead and of darkness, the realm beneath where all ancestors dwelt and spirits wandered in the shadows. These three worlds were linked by a great tree, echoing the Norse Yggdrasil, with its branches in the realm of gods and its roots in the realm of the dead. The living occupied the middle space, influenced by forces from above and below. Understanding and maintaining balance between these realms was central to Slavic religious practice. We still walk between worlds, even if we have lost and forgotten their names. Perun, the Slavic thunder god, was locked in eternal battle with Veles, god of the underworld. High in the branches of the world tree sat Perun, god of thunder and lightning, of war and the sky, chief of the Slavic gods whose weapon was the thunderbolt and whose sacred tree was the mighty oak. Below, in the roots and the watery underworld, dwelt Veles, god of cattle, wealth, magic, and the dead, often depicted as a serpent or a great dragon. These two mighty gods were locked in eternal conflict, Perun striking down with his lightning while Veles rose up to challenge him, bringing drought and disease when he gained the upper hand. Their great battle represented the eternal cosmic struggle between order and chaos, sky and earth, summer and winter. When rain fell after a thunderstorm, it meant Perun had triumphed, releasing the life-giving waters that Veles had hoarded below. Their eternal conflict continues in every turning of the seasons. Baba Yaga was a fearsome witch who lived in a hut that walked on chicken legs. In the deep, dark forests of Slavic lands lived Baba Yaga, an ancient and deeply ambiguous figure who might help a wandering hero or eat him alive, depending entirely on her mood and the proper respect shown. Her hut stood on giant chicken legs and could spin around at a word, surrounded by a fence of bones topped with glowing human skulls. She flew through the air in a great iron mortar, steering with a pestle and sweeping away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. Heroes who sought her out might receive magical aid, a wise answer to their question, or a quick and terrible death in her oven. She seemed to embody the wild wisdom of the forest itself, neither truly good nor truly evil, but utterly indifferent to human morality. To survive an encounter with Baba Yaga required courage, cleverness, and perfect manners. The old forest still has its keepers. The Firebird was a magical creature whose feathers glowed with golden light. In Slavic folklore, the Firebird was a creature of wonder and danger, its plumage blazing with colors that put the flames of any fire to shame. To glimpse, it brought both blessing and curse, for once a hero saw the Firebird, he could not rest until he possessed it, and the quest to capture this magical creature would lead him through trials and adventures beyond imagining. Even a single small feather from the Firebird could light up a room as bright as day or set a path for a lost traveler through the darkest forest. The bird often belonged to a distant king or dwelt in an enchanted garden filled with golden apples. Like many creatures of myth, the Firebird represented the dangerous allure of the extraordinary, the way that beauty can lead us into paths we never intended to walk. Some lights are worth chasing even into danger and the unknown darkness. And now we cross the great ocean to the lands shaped by different gods and different dreams. The Maya believed time moved in cycles and that the world had been created and destroyed several times. For the Maya, time was not a line stretching endlessly forward, but a wheel turning through great cycles of creation and destruction. The gods had created the world multiple times, each creation ending in cataclysm because the beings they made proved imperfect. The current world, our world, is the fourth or fifth creation, depending on which ancient text you consult, and it too will eventually end so that a new cycle can begin. The Maya developed extraordinarily precise calendars to track these cosmic cycles, calendars so accurate they predicted astronomical events with remarkable precision. The infamous 2012 prophecy was based on a misunderstanding of Maya timekeeping. A great cycle was ending, But the point was never destruction, but rather renewal and rebirth. Endings make room for new beginnings. The wheel continues to turn. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was a god of wind, learning, and civilization. Among the most important deities of ancient Mesoamerica was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, whose worship stretched back thousands of years and whose influence touched the Aztec, Maya, and earlier civilizations. He was a god of wind, of the morning star, of arts and learning, credited with giving humanity knowledge of agriculture, calendar making, and the arts of civilization. His image, a serpent covered in the green feathers of the Quetzal bird, combined the earthly serpent with the heavenly bird, uniting the realms of earth and sky. Legend told that he had sailed away to the east, promising to return one day to his people. When Spanish ships appeared on the eastern horizon, some wondered if the prophecy was being fulfilled, with tragic, devastating consequences for the peoples of Mexico. Some returns bring not salvation, but disaster. The Aztecs believed the sun god required blood to rise each morning. For the Aztecs, the cosmos existed in a state of precarious balance that required constant maintenance through ritual sacrifice. The sun god Huitzilopochtli was locked in eternal battle against the forces of night, and only the precious water, the Chalchihuatl or sacrificial blood, could give him the strength to rise each morning and cross the sky. Without this sacred nourishment, the sun would fail, the world would end, and darkness would swallow everything. This belief drove one of history's most extensive systems of ritual sacrifice, from prisoners of war to willing volunteers, from small offerings to the great ceremonies where hundreds might die in a single day. However disturbing to modern sensibilities, the Aztecs believed they were performing the highest possible duty, keeping the cosmos itself alive. They carried the weight of the sun upon their shoulders. The Inca worshipped Inti, the sun, and believed their rulers were his descendants. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca built one of history's greatest empires under the watchful gaze of Inti, the sun god who gave warmth to the fields and light to the sacred temples. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, was believed to be a direct descendant of the sun, making his rule not merely political but divine, a living connection between the celestial and earthly realms. The most sacred site was the Coricancha, the temple of the sun in Cusco, whose walls were said to be covered in sheets of gold that caught the morning light like fire made solid. At the winter solstice, great festivals honored Inti and prayed for his return from his journey to the north. When the Spanish arrived, the Inca world did not simply fall, it was torn apart at its spiritual roots. For how could the children of the sun be conquered by strangers from across the sea? Some faiths are bound to the land itself. Many Native American tribes spoke of a great spirit that connected all living things. For many Native American peoples, the world was not a collection of separate things, but a living web of relationships, all connected by the Great Spirit. This force was not a distant God sitting on a throne, but the breath that moved through all creation, present in the wind, the waters, the animals, and the very stones beneath our feet. To harm any part of creation was to harm oneself, for all things shared in this sacred connection. Prayers were not requests to a faraway deity, but conversations with the spirit present everywhere. Though each tribe had its own name for this force and its own understanding of how it worked, the underlying vision was remarkably consistent. We are all related, all part of a single and sacred whole. The web still trembles when any strand is touched, connecting us all to everything that breathes and grows and lives. Coyote appears in many Native American myths as a trickster who shaped the world. In the myths of many Native American peoples, Coyote was the ultimate trickster, a figure of cunning, foolishness, and unexpected creativity who shaped the world through his schemes and blunders. He stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity, but often burned himself in the process. He rearranged the stars in the sky, but grew bored and scattered them carelessly. He taught humans important skills, but also introduced death and suffering through his thoughtless mistakes. Yet without Kayot, the world would be incomplete, for it is through error and mischief that change comes, that the fixed order of things cracks open to allow something new. He embodies the truth that creation is messy, that wisdom often comes wrapped in failure, and that even the gods cannot predict where a trickster might lead. His laughter still echoes in the howling night. And across another ocean, in the vast continent of Africa, myths explain the origins of everything. Anansi the spider is a trickster god who brought all stories into the world. In the folklore of West Africa and the Caribbean, Anansi the spider was the keeper of all stories, a clever trickster who used his wits to acquire the world's tales from the sky god himself. Though small and seemingly powerless, Anansi captured the great python, the hornets, and the leopard through cunning rather than strength, proving that intelligence could overcome any obstacle. The sky god was so impressed that he gave Anansi ownership of all the stories in the world, which is why to this day we call tales about tricks and cleverness spider stories. Anansi taught that the weak could triumph over the strong, that a quick, clever mind was worth more than powerful muscles. His stories traveled with enslaved Africans to the Americas, providing hope and wisdom in the darkest times. Every tale of cleverness defeating raw power carries his ancient mark. In Yoruba mythology, Olorun is the supreme deity who created the universe. At the summit of Yoruba cosmology sits Olorun, the owner of heaven, the supreme god who created the universe and all the other divine beings within it. Unlike many mythological supreme deities, Olorun remained remote from human affairs, too vast and too holy to be approached directly by mortals. He did not receive sacrifices or prayers in his own right, for he had delegated the management of the world to the Orishas, the lesser divinities who served as his ministers and messengers. Yet everything that existed flowed from his original creative act, and everything would eventually return to him. Olorun represented the ultimate source of Ash, the divine energy that powered all existence and made change possible. To the Yoruba, he was not absent but simply beyond, the light behind the light, the silence beneath all sound. In every breath, his presence quietly dwells. The Orishas are powerful spirits who serve as intermediaries between humans and the divine. While Olorun remained distant and unreachable, the Orishas were intimately involved in human affairs, each one governing particular aspects of life and nature. Shango ruled over thunder and lightning, Yemoja over the oceans and motherhood, Agun over iron and war, and Ashan over rivers and love. Worshippers developed personal relationships with these powerful spirits through offerings, prayers, and rituals, receiving guidance and protection in return. The Orishas could possess their devotees during ceremonies, speaking through them and dancing in their bodies. This tradition survived the horrors of the slave trade, evolving into candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, and Vodou in Haiti. The Orishas demonstrate how mythology adapts and survives, how gods can travel across oceans, and how the oppressed can keep their faith alive. The old spirits found new homes across the seas. Many African creation myths describe the world emerging from water or darkness. Across the vast continent of Africa, countless creation myths describe how the orderly world emerged from primordial chaos, often from endless waters or infinite darkness. In some traditions, a divine word was spoken, and that word became light, and from that light all things came to be. In others, a cosmic egg floated upon the waters until it cracked open, releasing the first gods and the raw materials of creation. Still others tell of a great serpent or a primordial giant whose body became the mountains, waters, and forests of the world. These African myths echo themes found in creation stories worldwide, suggesting that humans everywhere have grappled with the same profound questions about origins and meaning. Before there was something, there was nothing, and somehow, miraculously, that nothing gave birth to everything. The darkness still remembers when the light was born. In some traditions, twins held special spiritual significance as bridges between worlds. In many African cultures, twins were regarded with special reverence and sometimes with fear, for they were seen as walking between the ordinary world and the realm of spirits. Some traditions believed twins shared a single soul divided into two bodies, making them powerful mediators between heaven and earth. Others saw them as representatives of cosmic duality, embodying the balance of opposites that kept the universe in harmony. The Yoruba venerated twins as sacred, believing that if one twin died, a special wooden figure must be cared for as if it were the living child, lest the surviving twin fall ill from loneliness. Twins reminded people that reality was always double, that every light had its shadow, and that the boundaries between worlds were thinner than they seemed. They walked in two worlds at once, seeing what others could not. And in the islands scattered across the Pacific, the sea itself became sacred. The Polynesians believed Maui fished up islands from the ocean floor. The Polynesian hero Maui was a demigod of extraordinary power and mischief, credited with shaping the very geography of the Pacific. According to legend, he used a magical fishhook to pull up islands from the ocean floor, creating the archipelagos where his people would make their homes for countless generations. He also slowed the sun itself, lassoing it and beating it until it agreed to move more slowly across the sky, giving humans longer days to work and live. He tried to conquer death by crawling through the body of the goddess Hainui Tipo, but failed when a bird's laughter woke her, and she crushed him between her thighs. Maui's stories combine the heroic and the comic, showing that even the greatest heroes have their limits and that the universe keeps its ultimate secrets. The islands still remember who first called them forth from the deep ocean. Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, shaped the islands with her fiery temper. On the volcanic islands of Hawaii, Pele reigned as goddess of fire, lightning, and volcanoes, her moods reflected in the eruptions that continued to build and reshape the islands. She was passionate and jealous, her love affairs and feuds explaining the volcanic activity that both terrified and fascinated the Hawaiian people. Legends tell of her traveling from island to island, fleeing from her angry sister, the sea goddess, who doused Pele's flames wherever she settled. Finally, Pele found a home in the great caldera of Kilauea, where her fires burn to this day. Offerings were made to her before crossing lava fields or building near active volcanoes, for her wrath was terrible and her blessing essential. The Hawaiians understood that creation and destruction were bound together in her fiery embrace. Her heart still beats beneath the mountain. And as these island gods settle into the quiet of your mind, let them drift like waves upon a distant shore. You do not need to follow them. Let your body sink a little deeper and allow your thoughts to become as soft as the sound of the sea. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dream time, when ancestral beings shaped the land. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia carry one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, stretching back tens of thousands of years. Their mythology centers on the dream time, a sacred era when ancestral beings emerged from the earth and sky to shape the world. These beings were not distant gods, but immediate presences, their journeys creating the mountains, rivers, and waterholes that dot the Australian landscape. Every feature of the land tells a story, and knowing these stories is essential for survival and spiritual well-being. The dream time is not merely past, it exists alongside the present, accessible through ceremony, song, and the proper observance of sacred sites. The ancestors still walk beside their descendants, and the land still sings with their ancient voices. For those who know how to listen, the earth itself speaks in stories. In the dream time, the rainbow serpent carved rivers and valleys, as it moved across the earth. Among the most powerful beings of Aboriginal mythology is the rainbow serpent, a creator spirit whose movements across the land shaped the very geography of Australia. As this great serpent traveled through the primordial landscape, it carved out river valleys with its passing body, pushed up mountains where it rested, and left behind waterholes where it coiled and slept. Different peoples gave this being different names and described it in different ways, yet the core image remained: a vast serpent associated with water, fertility, and the power to create or destroy. The rainbow serpent connects the sky and the earth, appearing in the arc of the rainbow after storms. It remains a living presence in the land, sleeping in deep pools and sacred places. Those who disturb its rest court disaster, while those who honor it receive the gift of flowing water. And now, as our journey draws to a close, we turn to the echoes of myth that remain with us still. Many modern words come from mythology: chaos, echo, narcissism, panic. The gods and monsters of ancient myth live on in words we use every day, often without realizing their divine origins. Chaos comes from the Greek word for the primordial void from which all creation emerged. Echo was a nymph cursed to repeat only the last words spoken to her. Panic derives from Pan, the god whose sudden appearances caused terror in lonely places. Narcissism recalls the beautiful youth who fell in love with his own reflection. Atlas bears the weight of the sky, giving us atlases that map the world. Psychology takes its name from Psyche, the soul personified. Fury comes from the Furies, and music from the Muses. These mythological echoes remind us that our ancestors' stories have shaped not just our imagination, but our very language and the concepts by which we understand ourselves. The old gods still speak through every sentence we utter. The names of the planets are taken from Roman gods. When astronomers named the wandering lights in the night sky, they turned to the gods of Rome, lifting the ancient deities to the heavens where they would shine forever. Mercury, the swift messenger god, became the planet closest to the sun, racing through its orbit faster than any other. Venus, goddess of love and beauty, became the brightest object in the evening sky, inspiring poets and lovers alike. Mars, god of war, lent his name to the red planet that seemed to burn like blood. Jupiter, king of the gods, became the largest planet in our solar system. Saturn, the ancient Titan, became the ringed giant in the outer darkness. Even the more recently discovered planets received mythological names: Uranus for the sky god, Neptune for the lord of the sea, and Pluto for the ruler of the underworld. We still look up each night and trace their ancient divine paths among the stars. The days of the week are named after Norse and Roman deities. The very rhythm of our weeks echoes with the names of ancient deities, a reminder that we still live within the old mythologies even when we have forgotten them. Sunday honors the sun, the great light that rules the day and brings life to all things on earth. Monday belongs to the moon, the gentler light that governs the night and measures the months. Tuesday recalls Tiw, the Norse god of war and sky, whose courage inspired warriors. Wednesday honors Woden, or Odin, the Allfather and god of wisdom who sacrificed his eye for knowledge. Thursday belongs to Thor, whose thunder still rumbles in the name as storms cross the sky. Friday is sacred to Freya, goddess of love and fertility and the beauty of springtime. Saturday alone retains its Roman heritage, named for Saturn, god of time and the harvest. Every week is a journey through the divine. The old gods mark our days. Joseph Campbell identified a hero's journey that appears in myths across all cultures. The American scholar Joseph Campbell spent his life comparing the myths of different cultures and discovered a pattern he called the monomyth, or the hero's journey. Whether in ancient Greece, medieval Europe, or indigenous Australia, heroes are called to adventure, face trials and enemies, die and are reborn, and return transformed with gifts for their community. From Gilgamesh to Luke Skywalker, from Odysseus to Harry Potter, the same fundamental story appears again and again. Campbell believed this was no coincidence, but evidence that myths emerge from the human experience itself. We all must leave childhood behind, face the darkness within and without, and return changed by our encounters. The hero's journey is not merely entertainment. It is a map for living, a guide for all those who seek meaning. Every life is a mythic journey waiting to be recognized. Carl Jung believed myths arise from a collective unconscious shared by all humanity. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung proposed that beneath our individual minds lies a collective unconscious, a deep layer of the psyche shared by all of humanity across time and culture. This collective unconscious contains archetypes, universal patterns or images that appear in myths, dreams, and stories across all cultures. The wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the shadow, these figures emerge spontaneously in human imagination because they are part of our inherited psychological structure. For Jung, myths were not primitive explanations, but profound expressions of psychological truths. When we encounter a powerful myth, we are not learning about the past, but recognizing something eternal within ourselves. The gods and monsters of mythology are reflections of our own inner landscape. We are all made of the very same stuff as the oldest stories. Modern stories, films, novels, video games still follow ancient mythic patterns. Though we no longer sacrifice to Zeus or pray to Thor for safe travel, the ancient patterns of myth still shape our stories. Hollywood blockbusters follow the hero's journey as faithfully as any ancient epic, sending protagonists through trials and transformations. Video games send players on quests to defeat dark lords and save kingdoms from destruction. Fantasy novels create entire mythologies, complete with creation stories, divine beings, and epic battles between good and evil. Even science fiction, for all its technological trappings, often tells fundamentally mythic stories about chosen ones, forbidden knowledge, and journeys into the unknown. The forms have changed, but the deep structures remain. We still need heroes to inspire us, monsters to fear, and transformative journeys to guide us. The myths have not died, they have only changed their clothes. New gods wear different masks. Myths continue to offer meaning because they address questions that science cannot answer. Science can tell us how the universe began in a burst of energy 14 billion years ago, but it cannot tell us why there is something rather than nothing. It can explain how consciousness emerges from neural activity, but not what it feels like to be alive, to love, to wonder. It can describe the mechanics of death, but not what death means or how we should face it with courage and grace. These are the questions that myths have always addressed, questions of meaning, purpose, and value that lie beyond the reach of empirical measurement. Myths do not compete with science, but complement it, providing the stories and symbols by which we make sense of our existence. As long as humans ask questions about why they are here and how they should live, mythology will remain essential. Some of the deepest truths can only be told in stories and myths. The stories we tell about ourselves are the newest mythology of all. And so we come to the end of our journey through the myths of the world, but perhaps now we can see that the journey never truly ends. Every person who tells a story about who they are and where they came from is engaging in the ancient art of myth-making. Every community that celebrates its heroes and mourns its losses creates a mythology of its own. We may not believe in Zeus or Odin, but we still tell stories about origins, about struggles between good and evil, about transformations and redemptions that give our lives meaning. Our personal narratives, our national histories, our visions of the future, these are the living myths of our time, shaped and reshaped with each telling. The great cosmic stories have contracted into individual human hearts, but they have not all disappeared from the world. You are the hero of your own story. The myth continues through you. And so the gods and heroes begin to fade into the mist from which they came. Tonight, We wandered among the oldest stories humanity has ever told, from the thunder on Mount Olympus to the silent wisdom of druids in moonlit groves. We sailed with Polynesian navigators who read the stars as divine signs, and we walked with Egyptian souls through halls where jackal-headed gods waited to weigh the heart. We heard the clash of Thor's hammer against giants, watched the serpent encircle the world, and listened as Anansi spun his webs of wit. If these ancient tales brought you peace tonight, consider leaving a like or subscribing so that others might find this calm harbor too. There are more wonders waiting in other videos, more journeys through science, history, and the quiet mysteries of existence. You are part of a growing community of sleepy souls who find rest in these gentle facts. Right now, as you lie here, the myths we explored continue their existence in you. They live in the words you speak, in the names of planets and days, in the stories you love and the fears you carry. The hero's journey that Odysseus walked is the same one every dreamer follows when they close their eyes and drift into the unknown. Let your eyes close now if they have not already. Feel your breath slow to the rhythm of ancient tides. Let your shoulders release the weight they have carried. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest open, holding nothing. The world of temples and monsters, of gods who loved and gods who raged, fades now into a gentler darkness, the darkness where sleep waits for you. Tonight, as you rest, the myths continue their eternal telling. Somewhere, a storyteller is speaking by firelight. Somewhere, a child is hearing of heroes for the first time. The gods do not sleep, but they understand why mortals must. You are a small, warm presence within this ancient stream of story, peacefully resting among the wonders. Sleep well, sweet dreams, and may you carry with you the quiet knowledge that every dream you dream tonight is a small myth of your own, written in the oldest language of all. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.